Today I want to talk about 4 reasons of why you may want to pay off your mortgage early. And this is kind of one of those topics where most people sit firmly on one side of the fence or the other. Some people are in the camp of like, yeah, I don't want to have any mortgage debt. I would like to pay off my mortgage as quickly as possible. I don't care what my interest rate is because I'm still going to be saving money on interest by paying it off early anyways. And then you have the other camp of people that say, well, if you can get a low enough mortgage rate, especially one that's beating inflation, which a lot of people have right now, considering how much inflation has been raging, well, then it might make more sense to just hang on to that mortgage and carry it all the way to the end and use the excess cash to make other investments along the way and get larger returns. Essentially, you are leveraging that mortgage in order to make you wealthier. And the truth is, there's really no right or wrong answer to this, but I found a story about a couple that is doing this. They're paying off their mortgage early and they have an extremely low interest rate. So it's very counterintuitive. So I thought this would be an interesting story to cover and give you some reasons of why they're doing this, and maybe you would want to do it too. And I'm not telling you you should do it, I'm just telling you why other people are doing it. So this couple, they bought a house back in 2020, but they owned a previous home that they sold before buying this home. They actually owned the previous home free and clear without a mortgage. So whenever they decided to buy the new house, they were looking at, well, maybe we probably want to just buy this house in cash and not have a mortgage, right? But at the time, the interest rates were extremely low, as we all know. And they were able to lock in a 15-year fixed rate mortgage at 2.75%. Anybody that has a sub 3% rate are like the ultra lucky right now when it comes to mortgage holders. And apparently, rates went down even further a few months after they purchased their house and ended up refinancing just a few months later into a 1.99% mortgage, guys. That is just like, I'd never even heard of anybody having a rate that low. That is incredible. So what they did is they ended up taking their proceeds. They had about $300,000 from their previous home sale in cash, and they ended up taking that money and investing it into index funds, and they just put a 20% down payment on their current home, and they have a 1.99% interest rate. Not a bad deal. Their monthly mortgage payment is $1,750 a month, which does not include taxes and insurance, and they estimate their home now is worth about $550,000. But they didn't say how much they paid for the house initially, so I don't really know how much that has actually gone up in value since they bought it. So then you have to ask yourself, why on earth would anybody ever consider paying off a 1.99% mortgage early? Well, their first reason is their retirement goals. They plan to retire early at only 50 years old, and having debt freedom makes it easier to retire early. And that only gives them about 5 years from now to retire, so they're in their mid-40s. And having their home paid off by the time they retire automatically lowers their monthly expenses by that $1,750 a month, which is their mortgage payment. And their retirement plan is to retire with the 4% rule, which is something I've covered here on the channel before. It's basically where you withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year and adjust it for inflation every year moving forward. So the fewer bills that they have, then the more likely they'll be able to survive with ease in retirement. Now, the second reason they're paying off their mortgage early is because they still have money left over each month to continue a sizable amount of investing towards their retirement and pay off their mortgage early. So they're kind of doing both at the same time. Instead of paying $1,750 a month on their mortgage, they pay $2,500 a month. So they're paying an extra $751 per month towards the principal. And the rest of the money they have left over, they are stacking away into their health savings account. And obviously this has been beneficial for them in the last few years, especially given how much the stock market has been going up. So you're simultaneously paying off your mortgage early while continuing to invest towards your retirement, taking advantage of the current market conditions. Now, the third reason, and probably the most obvious reason to pay off your mortgage early, is to save money on interest. And a lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, that extra $750 a month they're putting towards their mortgage, if they would just continue investing it into this hot stock market, then they would be able to probably generate a larger return with that money, and you would be right. But the thing is, that wouldn't be working towards their retirement goal. They might have more money saved for retirement, but then by the time they retire, they won't actually have their house paid off, and having that extra $1,750 a month to pay while you don't actually have a job or any actual income coming in anymore, that can be a problem. Remember, they're retiring at 50 years old, so they're very far away from being able to collect Social Security or anything like that. And really, if you're somebody out there that's looking to save money on interest and that's your number one reason to pay off the mortgage early, then the best strategy is to throw as much money at it as you can each month as possible and cut those loan terms down to the lowest amount possible, because the fewer mortgage payments you pay, the less interest you're going to end up paying, especially since interest is front loaded on your mortgage. But it also makes me think, like, I'm not their financial advisor. I'm just thinking outside the box here and looking at their situation in retrospect. You know, if they had the money to purchase a house in cash to begin with in 2020, even though the interest rates were lower then, and they locked in a fabulous deal, they've already been paying interest on this house for the past 4 years, had to pay additional closing costs that you don't have when you purchase a home with cash. So it really makes me wonder how much they're really going to be coming out ahead here, even if they were investing extra money in the stock market along the way. Because they could have just had a paid off home starting in 2020 at the very beginning of their journey, and if the house grew in equity in the meantime, they have that. And also, since they're still working, any money that they would have been paying towards their mortgage all these years, they would have been able to funnel into the stock market instead. So I feel like you probably could have come out ahead that way too, and not even started off with a mortgage, and you actually kind of lost money when you look at it from the stance that even though you had a very low rate, refinancing costs money. They did the initial purchase, so they basically purchased 2 houses in the span of 3 months, because you had the initial purchase, then you had the refinance. That stuff's not free, guys. You have closing costs. There are costs associated with closing on a property, even if you're just refinancing. And also, you pay more to close on a house, substantially more, about 2% more, when you have a mortgage versus when you're paying cash. In retrospect, I think my personal opinion would be that it would have been smarter just to pay for the house in cash up front, and then they could have always taken out a mortgage after the fact if they thought that was a good idea. But anyways, nobody can go back in time, just kind of rehashing what we already know about this to see if that would have been a good idea or not. Now, the fourth reason, and probably the best reason to pay off your mortgage early, and a lot of people who are on the camp of having no mortgage think this, is that we are getting peace of mind. They don't like having debt and the stress that comes along with it, and they like to live a debt-free lifestyle. I am the same way. In fact, the only debt I do still have is my mortgage, and the only reason I haven't paid it off yet is because I am in the boat where I'm not really sure if we're still going to keep this property or not. Right? Since we're still like up in the air of whether or not we're going to sell this condo. And it really wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to pay off the mortgage now, especially if we ended up selling it in the next year or two. You know, if a couple more years goes by and it becomes pretty apparent that we're going to hang on to this condo, then I will probably end up paying off the mortgage, even though my rate is pretty low also. It's not as low as these people. I mean, my rate's like 4.125%. Not nearly as good, especially because I'm self-employed, so you don't get access to those lowest rates like people got, this 1.99%. Usually that's only available for W-2 wage earners, which never made any sense to me, especially if you can show a nice solid income. And let's face it, guys, not having a mortgage payment frees up so much extra money to use on other things in life, when it comes to travel, when it comes to spending on luxury items, splurging, going out for a nice dinner here and there. That's all money that you have extra that you don't have to pay towards that mortgage anymore. Let's face it, a lot of people will just sleep better at night knowing they don't have a mortgage payment, knowing that they are 100% debt free. That is a good feeling. And the way I look at it too is like, especially since I'm still in the early years of my mortgage, I can literally save hundreds of thousands of dollars if I pay off my mortgage within the next couple of years. That's no small amount. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of extra savings that you can take advantage of. Now, I found another interesting story today that talked about how the research is now showing that the timing of a home purchase plays a significant role in an owner's ability to weather the increase in hidden costs of homeownership. Well, I find that extremely interesting, especially since all of the professional and expert advice for all of these years has always been, don't try to time the market. It's more important the time in the market. And that advice goes for the stock market and real estate, right? People just tell you you should buy a house as soon as you're able to. Forget about what's happening with the market, right? Because the time in the market is more important than timing the market. But I've always thought that is a bunch of BS, and now this new study is proving that's the case. It says here that owning a home can be an expensive endeavor, and in addition to monthly payments to service the loan, there are hidden costs of homeownership. Who would have known? Where would you have heard this before? You have things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, electricity, internet, cable bills. According to the most recent numbers from Bankrate, they calculated that this hidden cost of homeownership as of 2024 is $18,000 a year, guys. That is in addition to your mortgage payment. So that's about an extra $1,510 per month. That's about a 26% increase in hidden costs of homeownership just between now and 2020. So over the past 4 years, your cost of homeownership has gone up 26%, even if you don't do anything different. Even if you purchase your home pre-pandemic, it is now on average 26% more expensive just to own that home. And here in Florida, it is actually even worse for the average homeowner, because in 2024, it costs about an additional $19,000 a year to own a home here on top of your mortgage payment, which is a 33% increase from 2020. So they say here that the timing of your purchase plays a significant role in a homeowner's ability to weather the increasing costs of homeownership. And if you purchased a home between January 2018 and December 2020, the typical mortgage based off the median sale price back then was approximately $1,003 a month, and the hidden costs were approximately $1,203 a month, putting your total cost of ownership at $2,206 a month. And now that these hidden costs have risen to about $1,599 a month as of 2024, that puts the total cost of ownership at about $2,600 a month, which was an 18% increase for those people. However, if you purchased a house between January 2021 and November 2024, your estimated mortgage based on the median sale price and interest rates at the time is about $1,812 a month. You combine that with the hidden costs of homeownership, now that person's paying $3,411 a month, guys, about $800 more than the person who bought before that time period. And for you, the change in monthly expenses is an 81% increase. And that's why the average is sitting there at around 26%, because averages are just that. It is an average, and some people are much farther below average, and some people are much higher above average, and that's how they come up with the average. And obviously, the lower your interest rate you have on your home and the lower the purchase price you paid, the further resilience you're going to have against these hidden costs of homeownership. You're going to have more breathing room. You're going to have a bigger buffer for your monthly expenses to go up before it really starts taxing you. And not to mention, anybody who actually bought pre-pandemic and has not sold or refinanced since then has seen a tremendous increase in the equity of their property, which is not really available to you unless you borrow against it or sell your house. But eventually, one day, you will be able to grab that equity. So it turns out that it does matter when you buy a house. It matters a lot, which is something I always intuitively knew as a real estate agent, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out, guys. It's all just numbers. It's all just math. Too many people, including too many real estate agents, are focused solely on appreciation, right? Everybody's just always concerned about, if I buy the house today, what is it going to be worth in the future? But that is not the only concern, as we clearly just went over here. And think about this too. If you're somebody who also wants to pay off your mortgage early, the timing of buying that home also matters a lot, because the higher your interest rate is, the more you're paying on interest in that property, especially all that front-loaded interest. And of course, right now, prices for homes are still near all-time highs. So it is still one of the worst times to buy a home. But in some markets, that is starting to change. People are starting to see some dramatic price cuts, and little by little, it is becoming a buyer's market across the country. And by the way, if anybody ever needs a real estate agent, whether it's a buyer's agent or seller's agent, I got you covered. I can get you set up with someone completely for free. I have a link for that always down in the description of my video. Now, anybody who's followed my channel for quite some time might remember the early days of my channel. I used to talk a lot about all kinds of things pertaining to moving to Florida. And for a little while, for I think it was a couple years there, during the pandemic especially, Florida was the #1 state that people were moving to. Well, that is no longer the case. We have been dropped down that list a little bit. In fact, now, according to the U-Haul rankings, South Carolina is now the #1 state that people are moving to. Here's something kind of funny and not really a surprise at all. California has also seen the greatest net loss of people for the 5th year in a row. Okay, I'm gonna scroll through this list here on the screen so you guys can see the rankings in order. And now Florida is #4 on the list of states that people are moving to. Texas is #2. And some of these states on this list became a lot more popular in 2024. Most notably states like Oklahoma, Indiana, and Maine. Those states jumped up the list by about 18 to 30 points in terms of states that are appealing to move to. And some of the states that saw the biggest declines on this list were states like Colorado, Nevada, Wyoming, and New Mexico. And of course, as we get to the bottom, it's not really a huge surprise to see basically all of the worst states here, and those are the ones that are losing the most people. You got Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and California. Pennsylvania's on there too. And this information can be helpful if you're looking for a place to move to, or if you are an investor that is looking at migration trends and wondering where people are going to. That can maybe be a good place to buy rental property because people are moving in, they're gonna need a place to live. But you also always have to keep in mind that these trends do change. Like I said before, Florida used to be #1 on the list just a few years ago. Now we're #4. And we've lost like 500,000 people just in the past year. These trends are not stable. They're always changing. Another interesting thing I saw about Florida is that the office vacancy rates right now across the United States are really at the highest point that we've seen in the past 45 years. We have about 25% of existing office space in the US that could be vacant by the beginning of 2026. And this is another financial crisis that we've been talking about on and off here on the channel, because a lot of these buildings have lost a tremendous amount of value, and somebody's gonna get stuck holding the bag, whether it's the owner of these properties, but most likely it's gonna be the banks, because the owners can simply just hand them the keys back and say, here you go, bank, this is now your problem that this property is only worth 30% of what it was 5 years ago, because there's no repercussions for that when you have a commercial property. And so this is another banking crisis that hasn't even really begun yet. Check it out, I just realized here that this building is probably abandoned. All the windows are broken up, everything is kind of just taped together there on the windows. This will be the next one that's demolished, you'll see. Walk to the other side and take a look. This has to be abandoned. Doesn't look like anybody's actually living here. However, Florida is actually an outlier here when it comes to the office space, and particularly here in South Florida, there's been a huge demand for office space due to the business-friendly environment that we have here in Florida. According to this study, the Miami area has less available inventory space than other major metros like New York and Chicago when it comes to office space. But before you just jump up and down and celebrate for Florida because we're doing so good when it comes to business, it's not that great, because still, even with those stats, because in the first quarter of last year, we still had 13.19 million square feet of vacant office space in South Florida, which equates to about $626 million in rent losses. Even though it's better than a lot of the rest of the country, it's still not great. And that just goes to show you that even in one of the most business-friendly environments, it's not enough to fight this whole trend of working from home and remote work. This is something that's probably here to stay. Even though a lot of large companies are fighting back against it, a lot of other companies are embracing it, and this data is a reflection of that. So let me know which camp you guys are in. Are you somebody who wants to pay off your mortgage early and just be completely debt-free regardless of whether you could have made more money investing that money, or are you somebody that wants to maximize your mortgage and just hold on to it as long as possible, or maybe never pay off your house? Maybe you're one of those people that just wants to keep refinancing forever and pulling the equity out of their house and living off the house. There's a lot of people out there like that too. Maybe I should put up a poll on the channel to see how many people are in which camp. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.